Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Imperial Diecast. Today I am so excited to present to you something really special. We have just crossed the 500 subscriber mark, and this means a lot to me. I mean, this is just absolutely amazing, and it wouldn't have been possible without folks like you subscribing to my channel, so thank you so much for staying subscribed to my channel. And to present something special in this video, I decided to finally, after all these months, review a 1/18 scale AUTOart. And this is none other than the Lotus Europa S, which a couple weeks ago I made a video telling you that you can still buy this without spending a lot of money. And I had one of these in my collection, so I just decided to present it. So this is basically what the car looks like inside its box, and this is from the AUTOart Performance series, which means that they come in these boxes which are visible from pretty much every single angle, and that makes them so great. It means you do not need a separate display to be able to show this car without it collecting dust. Now let's get this model out of the box, and then let's get started. The Lotus Europa S is a two-seat, mid-engine sports car marketed as a GT or a Grand Touring Coupe, but compared to the Lotus Elise and the Lotus Exige, a more toned-down and comfortable variant, because it has stuff like air conditioning and power windows, and therefore more comparable performance-wise to the Lotus Evora. The Europa S is a modern version of the Europa line from the 1960s and 1970s, which looks a bit like a Miura with a Dino 246 with the wheels of a Porsche 356, doesn't it? Delivery of the Europa S began in September 2006 from the Lotus factory at Hethel, Norfolk, and 456 cars were made. The Europa S was upgraded to the Europa SE in 2008 with a slightly more powerful engine, and production of these stopped in 2010. The retail price of the Lotus Europa S back in the day was around £33,000, putting it in the same category, price and performance-wise, as the second-gen Audi TT and BMW Z4, as well as the Nissan 350Z. So I came across this car on Amazon when I was basically searching for 1/18 scale AUTOarts that do not cost an arm and a leg to buy. And I managed to find this car for just 43 euros from a very prominent seller on Amazon.de known as alles-meine.de. And that guy has like a monopoly when it comes to selling diecast cars, apart from Amazon as a third-party retailer on their website. The problem is that his customer service really sucks. I mean, I've had a bad experience with him in the past, but his prices really are unbeatable. So when you order something from him, you just have to hope and pray that when it arrives, it'll arrive in a good condition, because if you're not happy with it and you want to send it back, you have to pay the return shipping yourself. And he generally does not respond to any kind of like mail that you send to him unless you're like super friendly and stuff, and then even then you're like maybe lucky if he does. So I wouldn't recommend him, but because there isn't any other way around him, if you really want to have a car that you cannot find for a good price anywhere else, and he has it, then go and buy from him, I guess. But yeah, that's basically how I got this 1/18 scale AUTOart for just 42 euros, which is an absolute steal for a model that is new and mint in box, right? And this is a very interesting car. This is actually a Lotus Europa S. Oftentimes when you're collecting diecast cars, you come across vehicles that you might not have heard of in real life. And then you learn so many new things about the car when you actually look it up online. AUTOart makes this car in 2 different colors. This silver, and apart from that there's also a white version. And for a long time I couldn't decide which one of the 2 I wanted, but then ultimately I decided for the silver, and I'm actually quite happy that I did. The silver looks absolutely fantastic in direct sunlight. The whole car seems to just glow metallic. It's just absolutely beautiful. But even here in diffuse sunlight, it looks really good. So I'm going to take you through this car. We're going to find out about all the quirks and features of it, and because this is the first 1/18 scale AUTOart that I'm reviewing on the channel, I'm going to show you so many cool features that you will not find on other manufacturers. Let's get started. So here we are at the front of this diecast car, and the first thing that you will notice is that the Lotus logo in the middle is not a sticker or even a print, but an actual separate piece. An actual badge. And it's done very nicely. You can see the yellow surrounding and the green Lotus logo. And taking a look at the headlights, no pegs. And the bulbs themselves are also done pretty well. But it gets more interesting when we move further down. Here you can see that we have 4 different additional lights. I believe these lights below the headlights are the indicators, and they are done very nicely. You can see that they have a separate texture on them, no pegs either. And then moving further down, you can see the fog lamps of this vehicle. And just look at the amount of details there are on these fog lamps. They're just absolutely mind-blowing. We then have the front grille here. And this is already where the fun begins. Notice the fact that the front grille is entirely perforated. So this is perforated mesh. This is not just a single plastic piece. And then you have this little gap here in the front, which I believe is where the car's tow hook would exist, but I'm not sure. In any case, there's a high level of detail here, and AUTOart really did replicate the front of the Lotus Europa S as best as they could. But we're not done with the front yet. Moving further up, you can see that we have another grille here. And notice how it is perforated, entirely perforated. That looks really cool. But it's going to look even cooler from a different angle, From this angle, you can see very well how this grille here up front is perforated. Not only that, but if you put it under direct sunlight, you will be able to tell that there are two radiators inside, which you normally wouldn't be able to see. This is the kind of detail that you get on an AUTOart. A radiator behind a grille. Absolutely stunning. And this is where we come to the first part of the car which we can open, which is the boot, or the trunk over here. Just gotta be very careful. Opens like this. And inside, you can actually see that we have quite a few things. We have here a container with a warning label. If I can just get this to focus. And we also have a few other things here. A few bottles. And I guess a few parts of the car's transmission or something. Because the engine of this car, as you know, is at the back. It doesn't look like there's actually much room to put any bags or anything like that in there. But it's nice that AUTOart actually made this part open. So it just gives you an idea of the kind of stuff that you can expect on this 1/18 scale car. But let's move on to the side of this vehicle. So looking at the side of the Lotus Europa S, you can see that it is a small and sporty looking two-door coupe. And true to its name, the Lotus Europa S has a dry weight of just under 1,000 kilograms. So this is a very light car. But at the same time, it weighs a bit more and also has more creature comforts compared to the Lotus Elise and the Lotus Exige. Unfortunately, with 1/18 scale AUTOarts, you do not get any kind of suspension like you would on a Burago or a Maisto. However, let's take a closer look at the details that you can find on the side. We're going to begin with the S badge on the fender, and below it we have a tiny indicator light. And this is also the only complaint that I have about this 1/18 scale AUTOart, which is that the indicator light has a peg in it. I mean, all the other lights do not, so they could have removed this, but that's alright. It's just a very tiny nitpick. Moving further along the side, you can see that we have a very detailed looking key lock. And this key lock has also a texture on it, and you can see that the key lock itself is a separate piece on the car body and not just part of the car mold. Over here we have a side air intake, and this side air intake is actually perforated, as you can see right there. Very nice little extra mesh. And this AUTOart also has closed windows. This is not a given for every single AUTOart, because there are some of the earlier AUTOarts released in 1/18 scale in the year 2000, which did not have raised windows like the first-gen Lamborghini Murcielago. Still, no complaints here. And here's a closer look at the car's wheels. These are some very interesting aluminum rims that AUTOart has given the Lotus Europa. You can see that we have the Lotus badge in the middle, surrounded by 5 lug nuts. We have a brake disc and a black brake caliper. There's no branding on the brake caliper, and the brake disc does not have any kind of vents. It's not vented, but it still has a texture on it, and the disc moves through the caliper, as it should. And here's a look at the rear wheel. Also pretty nice. Let's move on to the back of the car. On the way to the back, you'll notice this car has a little spoiler here, highlighting the sportiness of this vehicle. So here we are at the back of the car, and I think it just looks absolutely gorgeous. To begin with, the only thing that I find is a disappointment, which is this brake light up here. Because this is just paint. It's not a separate piece, it's not a separate light. However, this is offset and more than redeemed by the awesome Lotus badging here. You can see that in this lettering, every single letter is a raised separate piece on the back. It's a photo-etched 3D alphabet. So that is just beautiful. And below that we have the Europa S rear license plate. And to the top right of that you can actually even see the rear key lock, although this is just a little print. It says Europa S to the right as well. And now if we take a closer look at the tail lights, these are also done very well. No pegs whatsoever. You got a nice texture going on. And the texture is behind the taillight cover, so it's a nice bit of extra depth there. And looking at the tailpipes, this is a dual exhaust, chrome tipped, and you have a very nice depth going on. Moving further up, let's take a closer look at the engine, which is at the back of the car. But before we do that, take notice of this grille right here. This is also perforated, which looks absolutely great. Right, let's get the back open. The Lotus Europa S is a hatchback, which means the entire back opens like this. It goes about that high. Stays up pretty well. And you can see that we have a little hook here. And that is where the wiring was attached, which kept this entire rear hatch closed. And that wiring was mounted to the car's base, so I basically had to carefully take that off while unboxing this car, and you should be really careful with that because otherwise you could basically rip through this. But now let's take a closer look at the boot and the engine. So here's a look at the car's engine. And this is basically a 2-liter turbocharged Ecotec inline-4 engine from General Motors, producing 197 brake horsepower at 5,400 RPM. This allows the car to accelerate from 0 to 100 km per hour in around 5.5 seconds, with a top speed of a little over 230 km per hour. I think AUTOart did an absolutely fantastic job on this engine. I mean, you can see that we have this painted cover here, as well as here, on this separate container. And then we have these valves and pipes down here. And this is an inline engine, as you can see. It's just one block like that. So it's done very nicely. And while it is a small engine, it looks great. But now let's take a closer look at the trunk. The trunk is pretty small, however, it has carpeting. And it should still be big enough for me to be able to fit a little bit of luggage. So let's see if this Mercedes bag here can go inside. Like right there. And perhaps a little first aid kit. It does. And now that we're done with the engine, let's take a closer look at the interior. The Lotus Europa S is a British car, which means that the steering wheel is on the right-hand side. So we'll take a look at the passenger side first. Right. Now, taking a look at the interior of the door panels here, you can see that there is a two-tone color variation. The door windows are also done very well, clear glass and everything. And now let's take a closer look at the interior of this car. And you can see just how roomy and comfortable it is compared to the interior of, say, a Lotus Exige or Elise. The Europa is always meant to be like a more relaxed and comfortable vehicle. If you look at the center console, or the dashboard, we have these air vents, and they are trimmed in matte chrome. The floors have a little bit of a texture going on, but they are also carpeted. And perhaps under the flash you can see just how detailed everything is. You got the floor pedals over there to the right. The nice texture on them. The 6-speed manual here in the middle looks pretty good. I think it even has a Lotus logo on it, although my camera cannot focus on that one. You can also see that we have a handbrake here. And now let's check this out from the driver's side, shall we? Before we move on to the driver's side, one thing I forgot to show you is that here on the roof of the car, you can see that we have this single NACA duct, and the back of the duct is perforated right there. And it leads up to this grille, which I showed you earlier. Really cool. Over here you can see the fuel cap, also done very well. And then of course we also have the door sill branding saying Europa S. So here's the driver's side of this car, and you can see the Lotus logo on the steering wheel, as well as the gauge cluster, although it is just a sticker. Still, the interior is very impressive for a car that basically just cost me 42 euros. I mean, this is still one of the cheaper AUTOarts out there, probably one of the cheapest. And despite that, they put so much detail into this car. So if you're a fan of diecast cars, you should definitely own one of these. Sometimes it's not just about the car, or like what car you have, but about the details. And of course, the steering wheel works. It's a little hard though. I wouldn't like play around too much with it, but it does work. You can also see that we have a few buttons here at the very right. And of course, seat belts, which I forgot to show you. Including belt buckles. Let's take a look at the bottom of this diecast car. Wow, would you look at that? You can see that it says AUTOart 1/18 scale Lotus Europa, crafted in China. And then over here we have an extremely detailed rear engine. I mean, you can see the hose, you can see like the muffler, a little bit of heat shielding as well. The rear differential, a little bit of engine detail as well. Very nice. Here at the front, not much. But yeah, pretty cool. Alright guys, I hope you liked this review of the 1/18 scale Lotus Europa S by AUTOart. Thanks again for staying subscribed to my channel. I have lots of more diecast cars to show you from different scales, so be sure to check that out. And as always, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. This is Imperial Diecast, signing out.